Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of daily number 432, where we learn to be a better gamer. We're examining some really just broad ideas in this matchup as a whole. In part 1 we looked at the idea of Terran players starting off after they early expand, being able to do some ground aggression, and then either transitioning into big ground or kind of smallish army but drops. And then it expands onto two-pronged attacks starting around 12 minutes. But from around 12 minutes and previously, Terran can generally only do a one-pronged attack, a really fast drop, or a really big marine push or marine marauder push at the front. And we want to think about how many prongs can be coming at us at once by asking, does he have a small number of medevacs or a large number of medevacs? And does he have a small ground army or a large ground army? We're going to look at this game and we're going to see a different way to do some cool defense other than using the Colossus, as we look at another Puma versus MC game. As we blast through it. Excellent, so MC sees a wall in. He checks up the ramp. He does not quite know what his opponent is up to. He's still going to go for this 3-gate play. And he's going to try to get as much information as he can. Right here with a little kill at the front. Now MC is pretty damn certain, after he sees this huge amount of Marines, that he's up against an early expand. Excellent. And he's already begun adding on a good amount of sentries. Nice, cool. So here we are going for our huge ground aggression. So we see a lot of defense planted at the front. We're going to continue to try to put the pressure on by doing another shove at this front side. But what do we identify? Not that many marauders. 0 as a matter of fact. A lot of Marines. This is a general indication of a fast drop. And especially that factory being there is really nice. Even without that factory, we see MC took a 3rd expansion. Kind of nice because we're relatively close by. And the question is, how now is MC going to deal with the fact that he's going to be soon enough up against some nice single-pronged aggression? Maybe an attack at the front with medevacs. Maybe a drop of medevacs at the side. He could go for, 6-gate and then go straight for the Colossus. But we see instead MC goes for an 8-gate play. And this is honestly one of my favorite ways to play out this matchup. Is with an 8-gate and Twilight Council follow-up. But MC botches this moment just a little bit here. You should be able to force field and retreat successfully. But this moment occurs, and this ends up looking quite bad for our hero MC, as we can see by his food count. But I want you to ask the question, right now, is Puma, after that exchange, capable of single-pronged aggression or double-pronged aggression? This is what makes this mid-game very difficult and very dynamic for Protoss players to analyze properly. Right now, all Puma can really do is an attack at the front or a big drop. So right now, while all this is going, we are fairly certain we don't need to worry about any sort of attacking anywhere else. And once this happens, I want you to ask yourself, does he have a lot of medevacs or a small number of medevacs? The answer is a lot. But with his ground army being so small, we know at this point in time, our opponent can only have a small amount of army. He's back to single-pronged attacks. He was at double-pronged for a little while there when he had a big army and hadn't engaged us, but after all these trades and exchanges, it's just single-pronged aggression. So what MC is going to do is, now that he has this blink, which will help us against drops very, very nicely, and he's getting Zealot leg speed, he's going to kill this off, and he's going to go for a small push. Now, while this is going on, we want to select all the warp gates again, and we want to go to the MC cam. This is a period where, as we're pushing, we're going to hit a point where, as we're crossing the map, we have a nice convenience that we can be a little more aggressive with our warp-ins, because we have blink stalkers. They're very fast, they're very mobile. We can do some warp-ins or retreat. Let's suppose for a moment that the Terran player drops us right now. I want you to think about how big his army can possibly be. Probably not that big. In fact, if we go to the unit counting station, we see that he has 3 Marauders and 10 Marines and 8 Medevacs. Makes sense, because we just did kind of an army trade in the middle. Anytime you kill off a lot of Marines and Marauders, it takes a long-ass time to replenish Marines and Marauders. It does not take a very long time to replenish Gateway units. So with this attack, if a drop suddenly swung into our main, we would be fairly confident that there would not be that much in his main base, because he's only really capable of single-pronged aggression right now. So this push is great. And also, the fact that we're spending a lot of our warp gates is pretty much okay. If we were pushing with a Colossus and Gateway unit mixture, we should probably be very wary of doing a warp-in round until we begin an engagement at the front, see that he has most of his units here, and then do this warp-in. Because if we were in the middle of the map and a big drop happened here, sure, he wouldn't have that many units, but we still need this slow-ass army to return back home. Or that slow-ass army to return back home. Now, with our cool little attack timing, this is a dynamic attack timing. This is not just go when your blink is done. This is, we did a nice little exchange. My blink is generally a defensive play. And here, I managed to overpower him. And even here, if we don't overpower and win, we can force him to leave a lot of his units at home. We can force him to be really careful, because we can put an observer here and blink up into the main, doing some damage here, forcing his one prong of attack to come back here. And while all that's going on, we can easily go forge, get upgrades. Robo and support bay for Colossus. Just by identifying that he's pretty much down to a single prong, that's when we're like, go, go, go. And if you're ever feeling a little bit uneased when you're doing your attack and you're pretty sure he's at one-pronged aggression, leave your warp gates available, so that way you can do a warp-in until you're sure. This is the one thing about really nice mid-game attack timings. Now, one thing that I want to note about this sort of multi-pronged, single-pronged aggression thing is that if you're worried about drops at any point, you let me rephrase that. An important question that comes to mind is, should I get drop? All right, I have to do this while I navigate. Should I get blink, or should I get zealot leg speed? Many people feel that zealots with legs are way better against your average infantry composition. That they'll do quite a lot more damage, and they're cheaper, and blah, 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 blah. They love them. Here's the game. And many people say, well, you need blink to be able to deal with the drops. It's really important. If you're up against pretty small, if you're against small numbers, and he's getting fast drop, go for blink. If you're against, in general, if he's going for, how do I want to say that? There's a couple of situations where you want to get blink first. We're going to be looking at one right now. And one of them is if you have a lot of area that you need to cover, you really do need to get blink. If you are up against a player who is having a pretty big army and has a pretty good amount of drops, you probably shouldn't even just be taking a third in the first place. But if you are taking a third and you know the numbers are going to be kind of small, you pretty much have to get blink. And here's an example that we're going to look at right now. And then afterwards, we're going to look at an example where zealot legs ends up being okay. Now, as we ask our question, single-pronged or double-pronged, I want you to ask yourself as well, how threatening is that for me? If you're on one base and you're saying he's capable of two-pronged aggression, really have no fear at all, because you're on one base, right? All you need to do is make sure that your one base is covered. If you're on 5 bases and he's able to hit a lot of places at once, now you're having a little bit of difficulty. So again, versus our early expander, we're happy to go for some sort of exchanges. And we're going to see MC batter the STC into the ground. Just pummel him into the ground. Like, oh my gosh, is this going well or what? Holy crap, this is awesome. Oh yeah. Crushing him, smothering his face into the ground. Oh, that feels so delightful. So great, we see this transition that we looked at in the last game. I'm going to go for 5 more gateways, a 3rd base, and a happy time Twilight Council, which is here. There we go. In this circumstance, are we up against a big army or a small army? You might want to get over-eager and get these Zealots with legs, and we have these Stalkers here. The STC is in a terrible position, but watch how close he comes to ending up with a nice win. Here's the single-pronged aggression, because his army's kind of small. Single-pronged aggression between 12 and 16 minutes is where he can start really ramping it up, and Protoss has to play on the defensive footing. Now we don't have Blink, we're getting out of position here, and the Zealots, though they have speed, we can start doing some nice tactics on high and low ground. Excuse me. And these Zealots, in these kind of smallish numbers, sure they have speed, but suddenly we were doubling our opponent in food, and we're in a position where we're kind of in a little bit of an awkward spot because we weren't able to track down those medevacs. Medevacs, Marines, Marauders work very nicely in small numbers against pretty much everything except Blink Stalkers. And once the Blink pops down, this is when MC is able to control this a little bit better. But before then, it was very vulnerable. This bottom location we could have stimmed and maybe done some damage. You have to control like very near perfectly. What I want to look at now is a different game between Feast and higher cost. I think this one is the correct one. Where we're going to be getting Zealot legs first. And what I want to point out is how different this ends up looking. You've heard me talk a lot about MC's aggression. And we're going to look at kind of a passive opening from Feast. So we're going to see Feast do his usual sort of cool 2 guys and gas, so that way we can end up getting out fast Warp Gate and an expansion. We eventually get out a Stalker, but we see Feast go ahead and get a second gas geyser. He's pretty sure he's up against an early expander. This is again from IEM. So cool. This is where MC would start doing some sort of aggression. But instead, we're not going to see aggression from Feast. He's actually just going to go for these 2 forges. Now let's start asking ourselves the question, multi-pronged attack or single-pronged attack? Well, right now we're still in the single-pronged region. We're still in the single-pronged region. We're worried about a huge push at the front or some sort of drop coming in at around 9:30. During this period of time, we're getting Zealot with leg speed. We're getting Templar Archives. We're getting a ton more gateways, up to 7 total. Still morphing in a Zealot here or there, starting 2-2 quite early. If a push were to begin coming right now, we would just be, if a big ground push were to start coming right now, we would hold it off by some big force fields at the front, and then a warp in round. Ah! That scared the crap out of me. Stupid phone. Yeah, so we would be able to hold off the single prong by this nice spotting that we have at the front. All we're doing is making sure that no sort of scary drop ends up coming in to ruin our day. Otherwise, we can leave these gateways open a pretty comfortably large amount of the time and just do some warp-ins at the back. At this point in time, though, it's pretty important for Feast to start spending some of this money and get these Zealots warped in. And we're going for Zealot leg speed, and you've just heard me do this huge burble on about, ooh, Blink is really good, we want to make sure we get Blink, we're really concerned about Blink. Because we're on just these 2 bases, we can do something simple like place Zealots here, because we're literally not getting a third for a very long time. We're probably going to wait for another 3 or 4 minutes to do anything like that. We're waiting on 2-2. This is a very power-heavy build. Feast is morphing in a lot of stuff at the front. I think that more stuff should be morphed in at the back because we have vision of the center. We're totally cool with what's going on right here. A drop could be coming in, but the important thing to note is that we can deal with a drop with this small ground army because we don't have a lot of distance to cover. Now, at this point in time, we have a lot of gateways. I really think that the one thing that's missing from the defense is adding on a lot more pylons. But what did I say about these prongs of aggression? If we look, Koss has a big ground army, and he delayed his drop. Terran is going to be in one of 2 situations right when he hits the 12-minute mark. He is going to have either the ability to do some pretty strong, or some middleishly strong two-pronged attack, which is kind of a smaller army with larger emphasis on the drops. Players like Teja have done this, where they have 2 medevacs over here and 2 medevacs over here, and they kind of want to do a drop of both of them at once, or 3 medevacs at the back and the rest running in the front. They're going to be doing that, or they're going to be having a huge ass army like this. I want to note, as Feast, when we're moving out, what happens if we get hit with, say, a drop right here? Our answer is going to be warp in the main and cancel this expansion. Right as he's moving out, this is the one key period where we really want to make sure we have a lot of stuff available right now. Sure, he ended up warping them in right on the money, but it's important that as you're getting to about here on the minimap, that you're aware that you should save it for just a little bit until you get right to the attack. Because what you don't want to do is get dropped when your army's right here and end up losing. Either the Terran player went for a huge big-ass army, which, as it turns out, is exactly the case that we see, or there's some small, meager drops coming up that we would just need to swat aside before we end up doing this huge-ass attack at the front. Now, as we're starting to get this third base established, that's when something like Blink is going to become a little bit more important to us. But at this point in time, just going pure Zealot Archon aggression right at the front door was kind of our plan. Getting 3-3. And now, as all this stuff is going on, I want you to relate this attack to that same thing that we saw MC do in the very, very, very first game. MC, quite simply, attacked an early expanding player and got him to be low on units. Now that this sort of stuff is happening, we see Koss is probably going to be able to hold it off, and we're going to pull back. What do we need? We probably need Storm. We're probably going to need Blink. At the very least, we're probably going to need to be a little bit defensive. And cool, there's the Blink coming up. Here's another round of aggression to try to keep the one prong that Empire Koss can give to us on a defensive positioning. We don't want that one prong being able to do some sort of drop or annoyingness. Throughout all of this, we've done no direct defense at the front line, but obviously being a little bit thoughtful before you end up warping in is going to help a lot. Okay, right now, are we worried about a drop or not? Are we going to be playing defensively for a while or not? It looks like we see Feast getting a little bit of infrastructure here. He can definitely afford to play just a little bit defensively. Maybe a one-pronged drop will come in. Maybe it won't. But we see Feast just getting a little bit prepared to deal with that. When this is one of the reasons why a lot of players like the big gateway style in this matchup. Feast looks like he's taking a huge risk. This would be a very risky position if, say, he was going for like 6 warp gates and a robo churning out Colossi. But because he has this many warp gates, he can easily do something like a big warp in for defense against a drop. Pylon placement is also really critical. Planting behind mineral lines. Planting like right here is generally much better than placing a pylon right here, just because he can drop and kill it, even though you can warp in his face. What you want is more secured warp in, like back there. And all the while, as long as Feast just kind of dances like this, he will need to leave almost nothing back here because of how many warp gates he has. And then he just gets into a good position, and see you later, Koss. Aw, yeah. So what we're going to look at now is, well, I guess a break is what we're going to do right now. And then after the break, we're going to look at 2 games. One is a game of Naniwa against SC that we looked at last week. We want to be asking ourselves about these questions like army size. Can he be dropping me? Can he be hitting me at 2 places at once? If he can only really be hitting me at 1 place at once, I want to try to engage and trade armies so that way I don't have to worry that much about defending back home. I can do a lot of teching. Obviously, the huge issue is you don't want to rush your army off to its death or something like that, but in a case like this, where Feast is clearly winning against Empire Koss, just kind of keeping an eye on those units at the front, we'll see is really helpful. So we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to finish. Oh, man, do I have a lot of games to go through. Woo! And then we're also going to watch a Puma MC game.